Hello and welcome to the 14th Essex State Representative Forum here on Methuen Community Television. Excuse me, I'm already choked up and we're just starting. It's going to be that kind of night. I'm Seth Graham. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight I want to thank Mann Orchards for hosting us here in Methuen. The Fitzgerald family has always been very accommodating for making this the political landmark of the Merrimack Valley, and tonight is no exception. Also, one of the main reasons why we do the show here is we have our live audience. We want to thank the people for being here tonight, for taking their time out of their busy schedules to watch these candidates, ask them questions, and interact with them. They're here because they care, as are the people that are on this stage tonight. So this program is designed to give you access to ask the questions to the candidates, find out more about how they feel on particular topics so you can make a more informed decision on Tuesday, September 9th. It's also designed to get you answers, real, true, unfiltered answers. And I'll do my best to make sure you get those tonight. All the Democratic candidates are here. We will feature forums later on down the road with the Republican and Independent candidates in a future forum to, again, give you more information about the candidates. So the rules for tonight's forum, they're the same. They never change. Questions will be asked of the candidates. I have a set of questions. Candidates will ask questions of each other. We'll also include some questions from the audience, too. Their responses will be timed. We have a timer right up front here. The candidates can see when their time is wrapping up and when it is time to completely wrap up. As always, we tolerate no personal attacks here to make sure that this is a fair discussion of the issues. As time allots, we will include some rebuttal as well to get the discussion and continue on to the discussion. Also, per Mr. Bill Fitzgerald, he has asked that there be no background chatter from the audience, to pay full attention to the candidates who have given their time to be here tonight. The other rule, always obey your moderator. So without further ado, let's introduce the candidates, and we will start in alphabetical order. First, from North Andover is Oscar Camargo. Oscar, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Seth.
And also from North Andover is Phil DeCologero. So welcome. And from Methuen, the incumbent, Diana DiZoglio. Well, now that I'm all choked up for the debate season for tonight, why don't we say that we get this thing started? We'll begin with the opening statements. We do that in alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, and we'll begin with Oscar.
Well, thank you very much, Seth, and thank you very much to everyone for coming out tonight. This is a very important time for all of us here, because we get the chance now to decide, to make an informed decision about our future. For all of you, my name is Oscar Camargo. I'm a 14-year Army veteran. I've been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kosovo, and I know what it means to serve. I'm also a fiscally conservative Democrat. I really do believe in the idea that if we're going to make the Merrimack Valley competitive, we should really reconsider how we do our taxes. In particular, how we decide how we grow in the future. For example, lowering down the sales tax, the sales tax. Even I'm against the idea of automatic increases of the gas tax itself. Those ideas right there, I'm quite certain that we'll get into a deep, deep discussion, and I'm looking forward to that as well. But I'm also a socially progressive Democrat. I really do believe in marriage equality. I believe in the idea that women have the right to choose. I also believe wholeheartedly that we should have a responsible gun ownership policy. In the end, your future is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. And tonight, as we answer these questions that you all are going to provide us, and I ask you only one thing. What kind of leadership do you need? What kind of leadership do you want? What kind of leadership do you deserve? And I'm quite certain at the very end you'll know that I am that leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth. Throughout this campaign, I've suggested that I'm a leader you can trust. Let me tell you why. I'm a husband, a father, a homeowner. The only person on the stage who has those responsibilities. I'm a proud Democrat. I graduated from Merrimack College, worked as a legislative aide at the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and most recently served on Mayor Steve Zani's executive staff. I grew up in the Merrimack Valley. I was born and raised in North Andover, worked for Methuen, and have labored in Haverhill and Lawrence so that those communities can prosper. Among other things, for over a decade I've served on such boards as the North Andover Sustainability Committee. I brought business owners together to form the North Andover Merchants Association. I spearheaded the Methuen Italian Festival, and I served on the Massachusetts Democratic State Committee. I believe in good government and honest officials. And 2 years ago, our incumbent representative made a promise at this table, a promise that she broke with her very first vote at the State House on her very first day. My name is Phil DeCologero, and I don't believe in that. We have a representative who says one thing locally and does another on Beacon Hill. I want to be a leader that you can trust. We wonder why people feel jaded and cynical about government. And I promise that I'll always tell you the truth. I'll always be honest and upfront, even when it's hard. I ask for your vote, and I look forward to tonight's debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Thank you, Seth. 2 years ago, I was given the unique and wonderful opportunity to serve the communities of North Andover, Lawrence, Haverhill, and my hometown, Methuen. I ran a positive campaign then, and I'm proud to say that I continue to run the same type of positive campaign based on the issues important to you. Jobs, education, public safety. What I've learned in my first term is that we can get so caught up in Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus progressive, this political group versus that political group. But the reality is, this job is not about politics. It's about people. It's about finding solutions to real-life issues. People often ask me how, as a new legislator, I was able to successfully pass the first bill I filed into law in just my first term, and successfully bring back additional resources for our community. The answer? I put people first and politics aside, working together with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get the job done for the people in my district. That's what it takes to make a positive difference. It takes hard work and genuine love for helping people. It's about helping Lewis, for example, to navigate through the college application process, or taking a call from Mr. and Mrs. Fitzgerald regarding their concerns about the small business community. It's about helping that anonymous mother who calls me crying regarding her son's heroin addiction issues and his problems consistently overdosing. It's about keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on here in the community. So I want to thank MCTV and Man's Orchards for sponsoring this forum to discuss the issues that are most important to my constituents. And I also want to thank Mr. Camargo and Mr. DeCologero for agreeing to join me here this evening. Thank you.
All right, candidates, thank you very much for those opening statements. We're going to jump into the questions right now. And I'll say, as we move into the questions, too, if we could just hold the applause till later on the show. That way we can get through as much material as we possibly can as we get through this. First off, just a bit of a warm-up, and Phil, you'll be first on this, and a chance to get to know all of you even more. Here's the question, and you will have 1 minute to respond. What committee assignments do you feel best suit your experiences and interests if you are elected state representative?
I think that the first committee, the most important committee, is the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. I think that right now we're seeing how employees in the state and employees locally at Market Basket have rallied together to pursue what is a very noble cause. I think the most important thing, though, is that when you serve on a committee, the most important thing when you serve on a committee is making sure that the people in your district, the people throughout the entire Merrimack Valley and the entire state of Massachusetts, knows how their representatives are voting. Right now, regardless of what committee you serve on, there's no way for you to access that information online. You can't go online to read that information. You can't check it in the newspaper. It's really unfortunate because I think a lot of people, regardless of which committee you serve on, want to know what the work is that you're doing on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
I'd like to just briefly state that I'm going to list my committees here, but I did just want to respond to that comment that things are not available online. All bills and votes are available online. They can be found at www.mahouse.gov. And I actually have a volunteer right now, I thought that this might come up this evening, who has a pile of directions if you would like to look up our votes and all of the bills that have been filed by anyone serving in the House or in the Senate online. He's right over here, so feel free to grab that. As far as committees, I currently serve on the Committee for Education, and what I do on that committee is basically sift through different things regarding curriculum issues, issues regarding where funding is going, and my priority on that committee has been civic education. I've currently been touring the Merrimack Valley and visiting our local schools to address the need for our civic education to be upgraded a little bit. Also, mental health and substance abuse, I was recently appointed to that committee, and I'm very proud of the work we've been able to do to bring back funding to the Merrimack Valley for that issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Oscar?
Oh, thank you very much, Seth. The committee I'm thinking about was along the lines of veterans benefits, veterans affairs. The reason why is because, as we've noticed in the media, the veterans, in particular VA, has experienced a lot of difficulties, especially in regards to the structure. Now, in Massachusetts, it's been rather beneficial. We've been rather fortunate in many cases, but I've been talking to a lot of veterans throughout the area, and one thing that's been consistent over and over again is about the amount of waiting time and the ability to get to and from the VA. That's one area in particular I feel very much, one, I'm an expert on because I am a veteran myself, and I have used the VA, and I understand how difficult it is sometimes to use it, and how difficult it is sometimes to access a lot of the benefits that go behind that as well. And hearing a lot of stories of these individuals who have served our country and served our community, and they're struggling even today to get the benefits that they've earned. Now that to me is just unacceptable, and that's what I would be fighting for.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you,
Seth,
Candace.
can I respond?
Briefly, please.
Representative, you understood that I said committee votes. The going online, I don't mean your roll call votes. I mean going on and finding out how each person votes in their committees. I apologize about that. I'm sorry. The mics are facing this way. But I was talking about committee votes and where you could find committee votes online and being able to access that. So if you're distributing that information, that's excellent. But your third roll call vote number 3, is you voted against requiring that those committee votes be posted online.
Are we going to go out of order and start debating?
Well,
If
it
you
said
wanna
there was a
briefly-
30-second follow-up.
If you want to
correct?
briefly respond to that, yeah.
Okay.
Move
All
on.
public hearings, all committee hearings, and all the documentation from those committee hearings can be found online. It's found at the bottom of your document. You can visit that website, and as always, if you can't find something that you're looking for, my cell phone is public record, my office phone number is public record, and also, my email is public record, and I'm happy to take those phone calls. If anyone has any questions regarding any votes, any bills, or anything pertaining to the legislative process.
But committee votes, those directions can include how we find committee votes, correct?
Yeah. We'll return to this topic in just a little bit. I want to continue moving on just because there's another hot topic here that's I really want to get to. It is a 1-minute response time. Diana, you'll be first on this one. And it's regarding the probation department. All candidates will have the opportunity to discuss this. After the trials of Probation Department Chief John O'Brien and his deputies on racketeering and fraud charges, and the exposure of what critics call business as usual in the state legislature, how would you work with House leadership to prevent patronage when filling future public jobs?
I'm glad you brought this up, Seth. I actually filed a bill recently regarding increasing accessibility and transparency to the legislative process in general. That includes everything that goes on in the legislature. And what the bill does is it forms an independent commission made up of both Republicans and Democrats. And what the commission will do is host committee hearings, public hearings, where residents from throughout our community and across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will be able to come into the State House for committee hearings and express their concerns about how they feel we can be more transparent and accessible regarding obtaining information, regarding any concerns they have about possible backroom dealing, regarding anything of that nature. It's going to take working together, and I don't think that any one legislator has the answer completely, but I do think that by working together in a bipartisan fashion and in opening up the process and bringing our constituents in, that together we'll be able to find some solutions to this.
Okay, thank you. Oscar.
Oh, thank you very much. In many ways, Diana has a very good point. We need to make sure that this becomes a bipartisan effort. And in many ways, it has to be. It has to be because this level of cynicism is rather apparent. As I go door to door and I talk to voters, sometimes it becomes rather apparent to me and to them as well that nothing can change. And nothing can change because they feel as though there's no one speaking for them, speaking on their behalf. But yes, Diana is correct in this sense right here. We do need to find a bipartisan approach in order to solve this. And an independent body would be very helpful. But I also think in many ways, if we want to add this, let's bring in another body in particular, the media. Make it as media heavy as possible, because that's the access right there that we're missing all the time. It's these committees that are created, made into existence, but then after a while they just fizzle away in the recesses of people's memories. If the media is actually a part of this, more and more, we can actually make sure that it's in the minds of people. So we make sure these backroom deals do not go back to where they were. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. Phil, please.
No, I think it's very encouraging, actually, that this was all uncovered. I think it's important that people have faith in their system, have trust in the government of which they're electing. And so it's important that this was uncovered and that it's being discussed out in the public eye. I think that we need to give more resources to our House committees to be able to review this process, to make sure that there aren't votes being traded, that people cannot trade votes in order to get people hired. I think it's important that that oversight that we currently have is reinforced with funding. I think so many of the problems in our state at the moment are coming from a lack of funding for fraud detection in every different branch of state agency, and I think that that's the biggest piece. But I think what's most encouraging is that the fact that this was uncovered shows that we're moving in that right direction, and we need to continue to move in that right direction to prevent this from happening further.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, candidates. We're going to move on to the next question now, and it's an economic jobs question. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond. Oscar, you'll be first on this. A strong local economy depends on businesses both large and small. Now, we've seen Boston's Innovation District flourish. Describe your ideas for making the 14th Essex District a positive climate for business.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And at the corner of my campaign, really at the center of it, is the idea of economic development. How can we bring businesses back into the valley? How can we make them more competitive? And as I mentioned in my introduction, the way we do so is by trying to lower down the sales tax, by being cautious about moving in our taxation process as well, and reforming and reconsidering a lot of the taxation policies that we already have. Now, for me in particular, I've also mentioned the Osgood Corridor Project redevelopment plan, which is on Route 125, a large area that used to be owned by Lucid Technologies, and now is a part of the Osgood properties, Aussie properties. That area right there is ripe for development, and it's been on the books for well over 10 years now. But there's a disconnect between the state government and local government officials that has prevented this from actually occurring. Now, what I would do is try to be a mediator and try to see what we can do to push that, because I'm not naive to think that as a state representative, I'm going to solve the entire issue of economic development, by myself. But I do know enough that it does require a leadership style that requires you to put yourself in the middle sometimes and get things done.
Thank you. Phil?
Seth, I think job creation is absolutely important. I think supporting our small businesses is incredible, because many of the things that we depend on as communities, many of our municipalities, their funding source comes from commercial property taxes, and that right there is a big reason why we need to be able to support our small businesses. It was behind why 5 years ago a group of business owners came together and we talked about how important it was to support our local businesses through building relationships and working with our municipal government. I take that same energy to the State House. Oscar mentioned Route 125. Absolutely. Every year at town meeting in North Andover, we debate whether or not we should be funding as a municipality extending sewer lines at Route 125. Absolutely, our state should be a partner in seeing that come to fruition. We need to be able to see that type of investment from our state so that the tools are there for private development along that corridor. I know that our town fathers, our town elected officials, residents at town meeting have fought for these proposals for years, and I think that it's important to have a state legislator, a state representative who you can trust to take this fight to Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Massachusetts is moving out of one of the worst economic situations since the Great Depression right now. And when I actually started my first job at the State House, the unemployment rate was at 9%, I believe. It currently is at 5.5%, which shows tremendous progress for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, excuse me. And as far as job development and job creation goes, I believe it's going to take a public-private partnership to be able to see development in our communities. As my friends here who have joined us this evening have mentioned, 125 is a great place to see some development in the area in the Merrimack Valley. I think that it's going to take, like I said, a public-private partnership, and that's why recently this past year I hosted an economic development tour where I invited residents and legislators from across the Merrimack Valley to join me on visiting our local and small businesses and visiting especially our manufacturing places and finding out what their concerns are.
Okay. Thank you very much, candidates. We'll move on now to our next question of the evening. It's another 1-minute response on this. The topic is casinos, and Phil, you'll be first up. Do you think that voters should have the opportunity to repeal the casino bill? And do you agree with the Attorney General's conclusion that such a referendum would violate the state's constitution?
I don't agree with her position, the Attorney General's position on that issue. I do think that voters should have the opportunity to vote to repeal the casino law. I think it's something that I personally am against. I don't want to see them in the state of Massachusetts. I think that there are other more positive ways to develop our economy, to develop our small businesses. And I feel like the societal impacts, the social impacts of a casino, as well as the economic impacts, the impacts on our small businesses, the impacts that it would have if we located a casino right here in the Merrimack Valley on our small businesses, is something I would never want to see, and I don't want to see happen to any other small business in the state of Massachusetts. So the answer is yes. I think that voters should have that opportunity to have their voices be heard. Seth, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Diana?
I do think that the voters should have an opportunity to express their opinion on this issue, and I'm looking forward to hearing what that is. I do want to mention, however, that 40% of the revenue for casinos in Rhode Island come from Massachusetts residents. There is a significant opportunity there to create jobs in Massachusetts and also to keep revenues in Massachusetts when it comes to casinos. Like I said, I do agree that the voters have the decision come fall on the ballot. However, I do want to bring up the job creation and economic development portion of having casinos here in Massachusetts. Having said that, the issue that I do have is regarding socioeconomic concerns. And that's why I believe in giving local municipalities, cities and towns, control over whether or not they actually want to have a casino in their area. It gives places like Methuen the option to say yes or no. In places where we see great poverty, it might not be the best place to have a casino. However, in places that are a little bit farther off the grid, maybe so there, but it's a local option.
Okay. Thank you. Oscar?
Thank you. I agree in the sense that voters should decide the fate of their towns and which direction they want to go as far as economic development. Now, I disagree with the Attorney General in regards to her statement because what we've seen in the past, for example, in Haverhill, for Hunking for Haverhill, we saw a group of people who decided that it was in their best favor and best interest to vote for the future of their homes, of their area, and they decided to vote in favor of raising taxes in order to create a school, to build a school, have the fundings for a school. And as a result, what you had is something that was almost purely democratic. It was, in essence, you're asking people to take control of their fate. By denying them that, though, what you're doing is that they have no control over that. And that I disagree with. And people should have a decision whether or not they should move forward with an economic development. Even if it is somewhat controversial, it should be in their fate. It should be their choice. Thank you.
Okay, candidates, thank you very much. We're going to move on now to our next question. And Oscar, it's actually something that you referenced in the question on committees. It's about veteran services. With the order, Diana, you'll be first up on this one. It is a 1-minute response. There are 4 veteran services officers that you need to interface with as a state legislator in this district. In fact, there's 4 of everything in this district. So with that in mind, how would you balance the requirements of this job that is pulling you in 4 different directions for the 4 different communities? Diana, you'll be first up.
So what was the question?
The question was, with 4 different communities that this position serves.
Oh, and the example was the 4 veterans officers.
Veterans officers being an example, but how would you balance the requirements of being pulled in 4 different directions?
Great, thank you so much, Seth. Thanks for asking that question. I balance my time hopefully equally between the 4 different communities we represent. I actually have a very chopped up district here in the 14th Essex district. We have 3 precincts in Methuen, 3 precincts in Lawrence. We have 5 in North Andover, and we have 1 in Haverhill. And that's a lot of administrations to deal with. That's 4 different municipal administrations to talk to make sure you're connecting with. It's 4 different boards of selectmen or city councilors and school committees. There are a lot of moving parts, and the way that I handle making sure that I get to contact everybody is by doing this job full time. And frankly, I think that it's required to, I think that it should be required to do this job full time if you plan on making sure you're going to be able to be available to these people to be able to do the job that you need to do. So doing the job full time, being available, answering the phone, and showing up at different local events.
Okay, thank you. Oscar?
Thank you. I've actually had the opportunity to speak with some of these veteran officers, and some of them, they feel as though they have enough resources. Some of them advocate that they need more, that some of them are just full-timers, but they need a full-time staff. They have too many case files that they can't handle. Now, I've come to the realization that talking is only one thing, but you also have to listen. The concerns of these people are rather legitimate and very, very real and true. Like I said before, this is for benefits for individuals who've earned them. These are for veterans, people who've sacrificed so much for our country and our community. They deserve the best, but sometimes, talking can only go so much. You have to listen. And I've listened over and over again. I have to tell you that the big giant thing that keeps popping up over and over again is they need more funding for full-time staff. They have plenty of part-timers, especially in Lawrence, for example, where some of the caseloads could go up to 200 for one individual. While in other areas, you have 3 full-timers for half the load right there. That's an unequal distribution right there. Well, in many ways, we should really consider about talking to these individuals face-to-face and finding out what exactly they need and working from there.
All right. Thank you, Oscar. Phil?
So the question, to be clear, Seth, is how we'd interface with all 4 communities?
Correct.
I mean, I think that I'm fortunate. I cut my teeth working in government for a district that included pieces of North Andover, Haverhill, Methuen, as well as Georgetown, Boxford, and Andover. And this district with 4 communities, all 4 communities have very unique needs, but we're all very much one community with the Merrimack Valley, and I think that you'd work with them very much the same way I did as a legislative aide, or that many people in this district continue to work, our city councilors, our selectmen, our school committee members, and that is by encouraging communication. I don't think that they're competitors with each other. I think it's about balancing time when you speak with your local leaders, when you speak with your local officials. I'm proud that I have the support, the encouragement of mayors in this district, whether it's Mayor Zani in Methuen, Mayor Dan Rivera in Lawrence, and it's because of my history, though I've never lived in both communities, of working with those elected leaders to see those communities be stronger. Because if those communities aren't strong, if Lawrence isn't strong, Methuen can't be strong. If Methuen's not strong, North Andover can't be strong. And so I think this is an amazing opportunity to be the state representative for this district because it's working with 4 very great communities and using that opportunity, using that position to encourage communication between those different local leaders.
Thank you very much, candidates. Thank you. We're going to move on now to a different segment of the show, and the candidates were asked to bring questions that they would ask to their fellow 2 candidates. So same question to both candidates. By random draw at the start of the program, Phil, you drew first to ask your question, and we'll continue going down from left to right, well, from the viewer's perspective, from left to right. So Phil, if you'd ask your question first to Diana, and then Oscar, you'll have your chance to answer as well.
Representative, why should the voters of this district trust you to be their next state representative?
And it's a 1-minute response.
Thank you for asking. I have been an effective leader in this community. I have passed the legislation that I said I was going to work hard to pass. I have been present in this community, helping with the various concerns and challenges that my constituents face. I pick up the phone when you call me, and many of you here tonight call me often, so you know that. I respond to my emails. I come out and I'm a part of this community in every capacity possible. Pretty much, I think that it's basically, it's a joint process working together, and I'm happy to be able to be your state representative and continue to work hard for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Oscar? And then we'll have some time to follow up as well.
All right. So do I repeat the question? Why should the voters of this district trust you to be the next state representative?
Phil, that's a very good question right there. Well, I'll say this much. I know I mentioned before that I'm an Army veteran, been in it for 14 years. I started public service when I was 17. And I did so because, in many ways, I've been blessed. I've been blessed because of my family has had a lot of opportunities to advance, to build the American dream. I'm a son of immigrants. And for me, the opportunity to give back to a community that's given so much to me, it's amazing. So why should you trust me? Well, because I've been entrusted with the lives of men and women who are some of the finest that I've ever met in my entire life. And if they can trust me with their lives, I'm quite certain that, just maybe, you can trust me to be your next state representative. But also, more importantly than that, you can trust me because I know what it means to serve. I've done so, and I continue to do so, and I will never waver on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. And we have a little bit of time for some follow-up if you'd like.
So Representative, 2 years ago, when you sat at this table, you made a promise that the very first thing that you would do is vote to challenge House rules and make sure that legislation wouldn't be found out about after it was voted on. And you ended up voting against that when you got into the State House. It was your very first vote, your very first roll call vote. Yet you were sitting at this very table and made that promise to voters. How can voters trust you when you made the promise here at this table, before this audience on this very TV station, and then didn't follow up with that?
Can respond.
Response?
Absolutely.
Thank you for asking that question. I think that my opponent is confused about the legislative process and the way that things work. I actually voted for a House Rules package at the beginning of session that required that all bills be posted online at least 24 hours in advance. I also voted that all conference committee reports be voted at least the day before they are voted on. I also voted for transparency measures in the election process regarding our local municipal leaders and making sure that they file their campaign finance reports and disclose their sources of campaign finance contributions and disclosures. Passed that legislation, filed legislation to form an independent commission on how to increase transparency and accountability in the legislative process. The voting record is clear, and I'm sorry that my opponent can't see that.
Seth, the very first vote, roll call vote 001, it was a 3-sentence proposal. When you sat at this table 2 years ago, you said the very first thing you would do would be challenge House rules to make sure this type of thing could happen, and another representative had the courage to present it. It was an amendment to the existing rules, which you voted on.
The amendment that was filed hours before the actual vote was to take place. A lot of legislators didn't have an opportunity to even read it. And
it was 3 sentences.
And I, along with my colleagues, for somebody who's so concerned about making sure bills are posted online 24 hours before we vote on them, I would think that you would understand that when a bill's presented a few hours before you're expected to vote it into law, that we would need a little bit more time to review it. That is why I formed the Independent Commission to hold public hearings across the Commonwealth and allow our constituents to participate in the process.
Okay,
So you're saying, though, that I just want to be clear.
let me give Oscar a chance to jump in just for fairness here. Oscar, if you'd like to briefly jump into the discussion.
Well, yes, I definitely would. Well, first of all, Phil, I understand the fact that, this bill had to be passed. And given the fact that Diana has had some time and experience in the State House, I mean, she's no stranger to the whole process that goes behind it. The transparency bill, the one that you're talking about. Okay. And I understand, Diana, you were just getting in and, getting your feet wet and so forth. But, it takes time. But, a lot goes into this whole process in of itself right there. I don't need to tell you this. Obviously, you're quite familiar with the entire process, and you too as well, Phil. And the fact of the matter is, this bill can be reintroduced. There's no point about, complaining about it now. Let's look forward to the future. I wouldn't be remiss of the idea of putting it forward myself as well when I'm elected. Let's just move forward. That's all we can do.
Okay, thank you, candidates. I do have to move on. I want to make sure both of you also get the chance to get your 2 questions in as well. I want to move on to the next question. Diana, it is your question to ask to both of the candidates. It is a 1-minute response. Oscar, you'll answer first. Mm-hmm. And depending on time, we'll have some chance for some follow-up, for brief follow-up. So, Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Seth. I demonstrated my independence when I filed a bill requiring our local mayors to file their campaign finance disclosures in order to appear on the election ballot. It cost me some political capital and I lost some support from local politicians, but I believe it was the right thing to do. How can we trust that you would be independent-minded on the issues and not cater to local politicians over constituents who need you to be their voice?
Oscar, you're first.
Well, I'm not a political insider. I'm not a creature of Beacon Hill. And the only support that I've been going as I go door to door and I speak to the voters is their support. Because in the end, that's the only support that matters the most. And for me in particular, that's 2 years from now when I'm at this stage again, facing judgment and accountability for the actions I've made. I'll tell you this much. If I go against what you consider to be against your interests or against what you think the community the direction it ought to go, then you have a responsibility, a moral obligation to vote against me. But I'm telling you here right now that I'm here to serve you, not the interests of anyone else.
Thank you. Phil, a chance to respond.
I have a real life example to point to with this. I'm very lucky that I call North Andover home, and I'm very lucky to call many of the people in that community my supporters. However, there was a divisive debate a little bit over 2 years ago about whether or not we should raise our community's meals tax. A lot of people that I'm friends with, that I've worked with, and I fell on different sides. I was opposed. I know it wasn't the popular thing to do as a Democrat, but I was opposed to seeing that tax increase. And despite my opposition to that, I was able to work productively the first time to oppose it. Unfortunately, the second time it did pass. But that didn't change my relationship with those people. It didn't change my relationship with the people who were on the opposite side of that issue from me. So you can trust me because I've done it before. I've stood up. I've stood up with people who are my friends to oppose an issue that they felt very passionately about. And the great thing is that after that debate ended, we still walked away able to work in our community productively on behalf of our town.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. And candidates, unless there's any follow-up, we'll move on to the next question. And Oscar, you'll be asking this to both candidates. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute to respond, and Phil, you'll be first.
Okay. Representative DiZoglio voted against the comprehensive gun control bill. Now, you mentioned before that you would have voted for it. Could you explain? And Diana, just so you know as well, I'll be asking you as to your rationale as to why you voted against it.
Certainly. Thank you.
I thought gun control, or legislation governing guns, can be such a divisive issue. And we had a piece of legislation right there that had been worked on closely by both advocates for further gun safety, and we also had people who were very strong advocates for increasing the rights, the access of gun owners to guns. I felt like that piece of legislation, it addressed many of their concerns. It made it less restrictive when it comes to a police chief's ability to deny somebody their right to own a gun or to have their license. It meant that they had to put that denial in writing. However, on the flip side, I thought that it also put certain safeguards in there that I think left our state safer. And I felt like it was a good piece of legislation, a good piece of compromise legislation that people on both sides of that debate could agree with.
Thank you. Diana?
First, I'd like to point out that both of my challengers here, my friends here at this table, have mentioned that I voted against the gun legislation that the House and Senate recently passed. That is not a fact. That's actually not true. I did vote for that gun legislation. What is true is that there's a lengthy legislative process, and during that process, there were several times to come up with a better version of the gun legislation. And I'm for Second Amendment rights. I have a lot of sportsmen that live in this community, and I did vote for the final version of the bill that included handled both concerns for public safety advocates, provided mental health checks, also had school safety aspects included in it, but also protected your Second Amendment right. And it was endorsed by the Gun Owners Action League. After speaking with constituents for months about this, I'm glad that we were able to produce a bipartisan bill that was supported by both Republicans and Democrats, and I did vote for that.
Okay, candidates, thank you. And Oscar, I'll leave it to you first for any follow-up on that, since it's your question.
Okay. Diana, now I understand that the legislative process can be a little Byzantine, a little complex here. But for the people who are not familiar with the entire process, at least my understanding of it was that you didn't pass the initial bill itself. Now, you mentioned the fact that it was eventually passed and that there was bipartisan support behind that. But at the same time, I do remember several interest groups, in particular, say, for example, the League of Women Voters, asking for you to make a stance. You never actually made your stance public. I was just curious as to why the delay. I mean, if you had such a strong, commanding stance, why didn't you make it out in public?
Well, I like to hear from my constituents first. I want to give my constituents the opportunity to voice their opinions. And while a bill might be titled one thing, that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's included in the language of the bill that's written. It could say an act to protect children, but in reality, in the language, it could actually be distributing free guns out to everybody. So we need to be very vigilant in making sure that we read thoroughly the legislation that we're voting on. and that we provide our constituents with an opportunity to call us, to email us, and to voice their concerns about what's actually included in the bill, and not just on the title of what it says it's going to do. And that's why I made sure to wait, hear from my constituents, and to make an informed decision after I had heard from everybody and was comfortable with the vote.
Okay. Candidates, if you're comfortable, we'll move on unless there's any further follow-up on that. We're actually moving on to a brief break in the program. We're going to take that break now. When we come back, we'll have a few more questions, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. The audience, I'm sure, are itching to get up and ask questions of you. So what we're going to do right now is take a short break, but whether you're sitting here at Mann's or if you're sitting at home, we ask you to remain seated and stay with us. We'll be right back in just a few moments here on MCTV.
It's never too late to learn something new.
To the 14th Essex State Representative Forum here on Methuen Community Television. So tonight we're joined by the three candidates you'll see on that Democratic ballot on Tuesday, November 9th. And just before we open the floor up to the folks here at Mann Orchards with their audience questions, I do have one more to ask of the candidates. Candidates, you'll have 1 minute to respond. Oscar, you'll be first on this one. So coming up, citizens will have the chance to vote on the law that allows for automatic increases in the Massachusetts gasoline tax. Democratic-controlled legislator last year raised the gas tax from 21 cents to 24 cents a gallon and indexed the tax to inflation. Republicans have argued that legislators should have to vote on any further increases. What side of this issue are you on, and why?
Thank you very much, Seth. And I mentioned before, I am against the increase of the gas tax, the automatic increase. The reason why is because the valley's been hit so hard, and it's very hard to be competitive, and for people, especially in fixed incomes, to go from point A to point B. And as I also mentioned as well, you know, I'm for it because in many ways, the last thing you should do as a legislator, as a representative, is to abdicate your responsibility to vote. If you want to allow the market to decide whether or not, you know, the gas tax increases, by all means go ahead. But I find that to be cowardly. I don't agree with that. I agree in the idea that if you want to vote to increase taxes, take that position to increase taxes. If you want to face the consequences afterwards, by all means go right ahead. But the most important thing is not to abdicate that responsibility, because you as people, you as the voters, have chosen us, and will choose me, to decide whether or not, you know, to increase the taxes or any of that sort. I am your representative, and I should be held accountable to it. No one else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Phil, a minute, please.
I absolutely don't want to see, I absolutely do want to see that question pass. I think it's disappointing that our legislature voted to index that to inflation. I think it's even more disappointing that it happened at a time when so many of our legislators were accepting a taxpayer-funded stipend to commute to work. I think that principle is wrong. I think it sends a bad message to voters, and again, it just reinforces the cynicism that I think that the voters of the Merrimack Valley and throughout the state have. It's true, we have a lot of commuters that live up in the Merrimack Valley, a lot of people driving into Boston and throughout New England every day. And those people who aren't driving, those are people living on fixed incomes. The reason why things like Market Basket have arrested our attention is because every penny counts. And I think that that's one of those things that we need our legislators to always be aware of. And as Oscar mentioned, never abdicate the responsibility that we're entrusted with as legislators to vote whether or not to increase a tax, any tax. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you. Diana.
I voted against this when it came up in the legislature for a vote, all the times that it came up, and I support the decision of the voters in the fall. I'm looking forward to seeing what our residents feel about this issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
and when the governor vetoed this, you voted, you flip-flopped, you were one of 12 legislators to flip-flop and vote to override the governor's veto. The governor vetoed this tax increase, and then you voted to override that, and so you voted to pass this tax.
I'm sorry, are we going to debate again and go off?
If you want to briefly respond, then I want to open it up to the audience after, so a brief response.
Okay, once again, I voted against the gas indexing, the gas tax indexing. I voted for it every single time it came up on the House floor. If you have questions about my voting record, my entire voting record can be found up online at www.mahouse.gov. You can also call me or email me or stop me on my way out here and have a conversation with me. The record is clear. Thank you.
Diana, that's not an answer. That's an evasion.
I mean, The
very
governor
simple
vetoed
question.
this. He vetoed it and you flip-flopped and voted to override it. The Eagle Tribune, our local newspaper, called you out for being a flip-flopper. It didn't call it any other legislator. It called you out for flip-flopping on this issue. At least be honest. Be upfront with where you voted on this.
I voted against the gas tax indexing. I voted against it every single time it came up for a vote on the floor. The vote, if I'm going to be allowed to respond, since I have been now asked 1 or 2 times from them, the vote that my opponent is referring to, and once again this comes down to understanding the legislative process, the vote that my opponent is referring to was regarding a vote that the governor put on the House to decide whether or not they were going to reject his proposal to increase the gas tax by another 3 cents on top of what the legislature had already increased it without my vote. I voted against Governor Patrick's proposal to increase the gas tax an additional 3 cents. He vetoed the gas tax package, the transportation package.
Candace, I'm going to ask us if we could wrap this up. I want to open it up to the floor.
And I voted against his veto.
So you voted to override his veto.
All right, we're going to move on to the audience segment. We'll have
Seth,
some
I think
additional
that this
time.
is an important issue.
Oh, I do, but we have people out in the audience that also
Yeah, I
have
think their
questions
questions
as
as
well. I
well
want to
are
give them
just
a
as
chance.
legitimate.
And there's a chance the audience may also want some additional follow-up on this too, but I want to be fair to the folks that have come here tonight. So let's open it up to the audience right now. We'll begin with you, sir. If you could just step up to the mic, give us your name and hometown, and Phil, you'll have the first answer for this question.
Hello, my name is Jeff Martelli. I am from North Andover, and my question to the candidates are, what was your position on Methuen Mayor's attempt to give himself a $20,000 a year pay raise, and what is your position on Lawrence Mayor Rivera's plan to move the RMV in Lawrence from its current location, and how will you work together with our local officials to address these controversial issues?
In 1 minute, please.
Both of those questions in 1 minute? I think that was something that I know the Mayor Zani's intent in the city of Methuen was noble. He wanted to see that the mayor's position be funded to $100,000 a year so that when future people considered running for office, they would be able to qualify, or they would be able to make an informed decision themselves when they made that life decision to run for office. I think it would be a great idea for future mayors going forward. I didn't think it was a good idea for this budget, but that's up to the local officials, and it sounds like the local officials hashed that out. That's a local issue. As far as the moving of the RMV, the voters in Lawrence elected Mayor Rivera to implement a vision that he sees for that city. One of the biggest things, Jeff, that concerns me about moving the RMV is that I don't want to see an anchor of that plaza. I don't want to see the anchor of that plaza moved and then see that plaza remain empty. I really think that it's incumbent on the city officials in Lawrence, and it's incumbent on our state officials to work together, as well as our federal officials, to make sure that that plaza, if the RMV is moved, if and when the RMV is moved, that that plaza has a positive anchor so that there's economic development continuing there. There was a third question. How would I continue working with the mayors? I would help them implement the visions that they would like to see happen at the local level. A state representative has no role whatsoever, however, in what a mayor gets paid.
Okay. And we're going to extend the response just by a little bit too, just to be fair. So Diana, you'll be next up.
Okay. First question, the $20,000 a year pay raise. I was actually completely opposed to this. I do believe that if a decision is going to be made regarding a pay raise, that should be voted upon by the City Council. I don't think that it was a good time to propose it, and I don't think that it should have been proposed for the person who was actually receiving it by the person who was receiving the pay raise. Regarding the RMV and moving the RMV, I've already expressed publicly my opposition to this move. I think that this move is actually, the decision to move this agency, which is a state agency, is a little rushed. I was not invited to participate in any of the conversations regarding the RMV, and it's actually, and to correct my opponent, this is an issue that's related to the state. Mayor Rivera doesn't have jurisdiction over whether or not the state agency, such as the RMV, gets moved. He has said that it's one of his plans that he wants to move it, but it's actually the Secretary of Transportation and it's the officials at the RMV that have the final decision. That's why I scheduled a meeting with our state delegation and the state officials at the RMV to discuss putting the brakes on the RMV move so we can start having a conversation with our constituents about keeping it at its current location.
Okay. Thank you. And Oscar, I'll give you a chance to respond first.
In regards to Mayor Zani's decision or to request to increase the salary of 20,000. I'm against the idea. I'm glad that it was shot down, especially during these times when the economy is just barely recovering, not even growing that much. That it sends up the wrong signal at the wrong time. But that's my position right there. And in regards to the RMV, Diana does have a point in this sense right there. It is the state that decides whether or not the RMV will move to one location or another. However, the effects that will have in that area, though, does have a very local effect. And in many ways, in that case, it requires both state and local officials to work together to try to resolve that and to mitigate those damaging effects. So Jeff, thank you very much for that question. I hope that answered it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, candidates, thank you very much. We're going to move on to a next question from our next audience member, who hopefully might make his way up to the microphone soon. Otherwise, we'll move on to somebody else who may have a question. Albert Zari, come on down if you're here. Otherwise, we will move on to another question. All right. Well, we'll get another audience question just in a moment. In the meantime, I guess you're stuck with me. So I'll ask a question first, and Diana, you'll be first up on this one. 1 minute response, and it is regarding the economics of this area and the sales tax. The 14th Essex District is made up of communities whose residents can easily shop in New Hampshire. We've talked about this time and time again. What other measures besides the sales tax holiday would you propose to address this issue? Diana.
I've been a firm supporter of rolling back the sales tax to 5%, especially in our border communities. I had an opportunity to put that line of thinking into action at the State House when I did have the opportunity to vote to roll back the sales tax to 5%. I believe that we need to be doing everything that we can to keep business local, working with our local business owners to hear their concerns. I also co-sponsored an angel tax credit, which is a new type of a tax credit for startup businesses and local businesses who choose to start up their local business in gateway cities in the Merrimack Valley and across the Commonwealth. It gives them a 30% reimbursement for their investment, and I think that it's going to be a great tool for drawing in small business owners into this region, especially in our gateway cities like Lawrence, Haverhill, and Methuen. Thank you.
Thank you. Oscar.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned before as well, I am for decreasing the sales tax to 5%, and I've mentioned that several times as well. But more than that, what we need to do is really consider, are there innovative ways that we can work with local government and also private partnerships? And I think there are. There are many organizations out there that try to help and promote entrepreneurship. For example, the Merrimack Valley Sandbox that helps out entrepreneurs with a small loan. Now, if we can adopt something along those lines right there, we can definitely, find ways to help entrepreneurs start businesses. But it's not just about starting a business; it's about sustaining it. I think everyone, who's ever started a business that I've spoken with as well, knows quite frankly that the biggest issue, if you're a brick and mortar shop, rent. Rent is always a huge issue, and sometimes when you're starting out, the rent, making it just ends meet for at least 6 months is always an issue right there. So I wouldn't be opposed to the idea in of itself right there of, say, potentially putting forward a tax credit that would allow at least for 6 months for startups to, essentially, if they were a brick and mortar shop, to have rent-free for those 6 months. Those decisive areas right there, that time period right there when it's so difficult to start up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Oscar. Phil.
I absolutely think that living in the Merrimack Valley, the sales tax definitely has an adverse impact on our businesses. It was one of the principles. It was one of the motivating factors why we brought business owners together in 2009. They had just passed an increase in the sales tax, and local business owners in North Andover were brought around a table to discuss how we can push staying local and shopping local. We've done this by thinking outside the box as an organization. They're exactly one of those types of organizations. Any legislator, and our legislators should be engaging moving forward on how we can promote economic development. I think that the biggest piece is educating the public more. As a state representative, you're a full-time advocate for your communities. That includes rolling up your sleeves and getting involved with these types of organizations to help educate the public about the importance of our local businesses. I don't think that people always realize just how much services we get in our communities because of what our local businesses provide in tax revenue and their property tax revenue, and how important, how essential of a piece of our economy and our local municipal budgets they are. I think that the biggest piece is helping encourage people to stay local and shop local, and legislators have that platform, have that soapbox to encourage that. and work with our local organizations to help promote that. Thank you, Seth.
Okay, candidates, thank you very much for that. We're going to open it back up to the audience now. Oscar, you will answer this question first. 1 minute response time, and if you'd please introduce yourself and where you're from.
My name is Michaela Mello, and I'm from North Andover. My question for the candidates is, many drug programs are funded through the state. How do you plan to address the heroin epidemic in the Merrimack Valley?
Thank you. Oscar.
Thank you. That's a very good question right there, and it's not a very easy solution either. The fact of the matter is that this becomes more than just how do you deal with the aftermath. Well, in that case, how do you deal with the supply side? How do you supply with the demand? Deal with the demand. This is going to require not just state funding. This will also require a lot of cooperation on many levels, whether it's local or state or even federal. Now, the one thing in particular I do want to encourage a lot of people is that the idea of prevention. Prevention itself is a key, but also empowering our local officials, in particular, say, law enforcement officials, to prevent, drug trafficking from, being an issue right here in the valley. Now, if we can, yes, trying to help out individuals who are addicted, that is a concern. But if we could do something about the supply, then that would also be just as equally beneficial. And for that right there in particular, I'm all in favor of providing law enforcement officials a little bit more teeth in regards to that fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil?
I think the biggest piece is education. One of the scariest things as a parent, and when I speak to other parents, when I speak to people right now who are dealing with this in their homes, is that people didn't recognize the signs. They didn't know what to look for. They didn't know what to look for it until it was too late, or they didn't think that they should start looking for it until an age when their child has already gone down that path. I think the biggest thing that we could ask, and as a legislator I would push for, is to have our Department of Public Health engage our local municipalities, all 351, to make sure that our parents and our public in general, because it's not just confined to parents, are educated about the signs, are educated about what substances are out there right now, because it's constantly changing. Just from when I've graduated from college, the landscape has changed dramatically. I'm only 27. And that's scary when you think about parents now that have 12, 13, 14-year-olds in middle school. When do they start talking to their children? People don't have that information. They don't know. Parenting doesn't come with a manual. So I'd like to see the Department of Public Health engage parents, engage residents across our state. We saw a pilot-like program happen earlier this spring in North Andover, where over 150 parents came to North Andover High School and met with local public safety officials, as well as our local health department, as well as our police department, our youth services, as well as recovered addicts, and learn
Phil,
about...
I'm asking to wrap up.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I apologize. Diana, your response.
This issue is deeply personal to me. I have family members and loved ones who have struggled with the disease of drug addiction, specifically heroin. It's one of the reasons why I requested to be on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Committee, to be able to be a voice and an advocate for not only family members who have struggled with this, but also for the entire region. I requested to be on this committee because I noticed that there wasn't one representative from the Merrimack Valley that was appointed to this committee, and I believe that we need to have a voice regarding this issue. It's about education and prevention, it's about recovery, and it's about reducing the rate of recidivism, which is going back into relapse and going back to the substance that you've had a problem abusing. In the legislature, I've had the unique opportunity to be able to file budget amendments to help in the education and prevention area. This past year, I'm proud to say that we funded education programs locally, and I'd love to talk more about it. Call me if you need any more information. I have to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michaela, thank you for the question. We're going to move on to our next audience member, and Phil, you'll have the first response on this, and if you could please introduce yourself and where you're from.
My name is Loretta Platt, and I'm from Methuen. My question is this. I've read a lot of criticism in the newspapers about the present representative. So my question is this, to the two candidates who are challenging her, what would you do differently on the things that you've criticized? And Diana, I know you've read those things, so is there anything that you would do differently on the issues that they're criticizing you for? And I want you to be specific.
So thank you, Loretta. My big criticism, I guess, the only criticism I guess I recently had in the newspaper was regarding the acceptance of travel stipends, approximately $2,400 in travel stipends to travel into Boston, to commute into Boston. I wouldn't accept those stipends. People in the Merrimack Valley don't get paid to drive to work. They get paid to do their work. And I don't understand how anybody could actively, I don't know how I could possibly advocate for the citizens of the Merrimack Valley and the decisions that get made at the State House affecting gas taxes, for instance. I don't know how I could make an appropriate judgment on those if I knew I didn't have to bear responsibility for those decisions. If there were more criticisms regarding transparency, I think I've made it clear, Laura, but I'll repeat. I would have voted to make sure that our legislature moved in a transparent direction, to make sure that we did post bills online at least 24 hours, all bills before they're voted on, including conference committee bills. And I would have made sure that I voted for the proposal to require that all committee votes be posted online as well. Thank you, Loretta. Thanks.
Thank you. Diana, you'll be next.
I'd like to address the issue of transparency and the criticism that my challenger has said regarding per diem. Per diem is public knowledge. It is a compensation that is afforded to all qualified state legislators. And my issue is that I have been very forthcoming about the pay that all of the state representatives in this area receive. We receive the same pay. What I have a problem with is that I am getting criticized from somebody stating that they do not take this type of compensation and they don't take any type of perks, when this past year in Mayor Zotti's office, my opponent, and this is known in political circles, my opponent took a $400 a week pay raise, which amounts to roughly $20,000 a year, took thousands of dollars in paid sick time and vacation time. Just weeks before, he was able to quit his job, his day job, to campaign full-time without having to work a day job this entire summer. So I'm not the one that brought it up, but if I'm going to be criticized here and we're going to talk about transparency, and I think that we all need to be transparent about our public taxpayer-funded compensation. Thank you.
Will I have an opportunity
We'll
to respond?
come
right
back.
after
I want
me,
to give
please.
Oscar his time, and then we have some time to build in some rebuttal there. So Oscar, please.
Seth, thank you. The issue for me in particular about transparency, about whether it's the gas tax, whether it's the subsidies, what have you, I'm quite certain that if Diana, Phil, myself sat down and we hashed out what we agreed on, you'd be amazed how much we actually would agree on. But it's not, and I'm not surprised about that. We're all Democrats right here, and we have certain things we agree on. But one thing in particular that I've always been a big fan is the idea that leadership isn't about doing what everyone else does. Leadership isn't about following the crowd. Leadership is about taking that difficult stance, that position when everyone's against you, and holding your ground, holding it tight. Knowing full well that, you're not going to be liked by everyone, but you know what? You've made your people proud because you made a principled decision. What I would do differently is I would be your voice. Like I said before, I'm not beholden to political insiders or other people of that sort right there. I am your voice in the district right here. And that won't cease until the day I'm booted out.
Okay. Oscar, thank you. And Phil, I'll give you a chance to respond.
I accepted sick time, which every employee is afforded, and vacation time, which every employee is afforded. I was given a pay raise, a temporary pay raise, because our office, the Methuen City's mayor's office, was understaffed when our chief of staff took the position of town manager in May. The mayor temporarily promoted me. He entrusted me with running that office, our short-staffed office, while he searched for another replacement. We continue to pay our chief of staff that rate. In fact, I took a salary cut. I served as chief of staff at a rate that was lower than my predecessor and lower than my successor, so that our office could continue to function. And so the city of Methuen, the mayor's office, could continue to respond to constituent complaints in an honest and fair manner. To target me for accepting an actual salary, and Representative, your stipend, you put in for that extra perk. Our state senator didn't accept a dime, and yet you accepted $2,470. So to suggest that this is something that all legislators do is not true. It's an option.
Then I want to give you a chance to respond, Diana, and then Oscar, if you want to jump into this before we move on.
I'm not the one criticizing. I didn't call the Eagle Tribune and do a press release to criticize my opponents on their compensation. I agree that we need to compensate employees for the work that they do. What I am saying, however, is that if I'm going to be criticized by my opponent, especially publicly, regarding the compensation that is afforded to all of our qualified state legislators, then we need to be transparent across the board and stop pointing the finger. All I'm saying is that we all need to be transparent. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying if we're going to be transparent, let's be transparent across the board.
Seth, we're not talking about compensation. A stipend is a reimbursement for a commute. That's not your pay. That's not your salary. That's not how it's defined in law. It's a stipend to reimburse you for commuting.
Let me give Oscar a chance to jump in here, just so in fairness here.
Loretta, how are you? Doing all right? I'm sorry it's been taking so long. If you want to, you can take a seat. I can answer your question then. See, for me in particular, I've already mentioned this publicly as well. I'm not going to take any subsidies. I won't do any of that sort right there. I mean, I work a job already, and I commute into Boston. And it's quite hard as well when you're campaigning and going door to door. So I've had zero social life. But the only reason I do this is because I really do believe that in many ways the community deserves an advocate, someone, a representative who's a voice, who actually feels exactly what it means to work and then actually, you know, go and provide some kind of service. Now, Phil may have the luxury of, like, you know, campaigning full-time. Diana is an incumbent. She's, you know, a representative full-time. I don't have that luxury, nor can I afford it. What I can afford, though, is going door to door, spending my time getting to know you all. And you know what? Even after this campaign is over, I still will be doing that as well. Why? Because you deserve it. So what will I do differently? Well, Loretta, you know what? I'll tell you this much. 2 years from now, when I'm sitting here, please, by all means, ask that question again, and I'll let you know how I did.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next topic. Loretta, thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
And thank you, candidates. The next audience question, Diana, you'll be first to respond on this. 1 minute response. And if you could please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hi, yes. My name is Jennifer Jones, and I've lived in Methuen my entire life. My question, actually, we just basically touched upon it. I've heard a lot of talk from the two challengers about the compensation of state legislators receive. This question is twofold and applies to all of the candidates. You might want to write this down. Did you accept a taxpayer-funded pay raise of any kind at your last job or current job? If so, how much? Secondly, did any of you take a taxpayer-funded paid sick time or paid vacation time, and how much did that total?
Okay.
I know we just touched upon it, but I feel like they didn't quite finish their discussion.
Okay, so you'd like the numbers then?
Yes, I would like actual numbers. I am a numbers person, and I feel that my community needs to also hear this.
Numbers it is then. Diana, you'll be first.
I don't have the exact numbers for you. I apologize, but I do have a general idea. I know that I didn't get a pay increase this year in our salary. I actually, myself along with all of the state representatives, took a pay decrease of right around $1,000 this past calendar year. Our salaries are based on the median income in Massachusetts. They're tied to that, so when that goes up and when that goes down, so doesn't your salary. We don't get to vote on it. We have no say on that, so we did take a pay decrease this year. It did not take any pay raises this year. And then your other question was sick time and?
Sick time and paid vacation time.
No, I was not afforded any sick time or any paid vacation time. Thank you.
Oscar.
Well, let's see. I got none. I'm hourly. I'm a contractor over at Northeastern, and I lose quite a bit of money actually going back and forth to work because you know, commuting is so expensive. I mean, the public transportation is almost a luxury that I can't afford. But as far as sick leave, none. Paid vacation, I wish. Let's see, what else? Prior to taking that position right there, I finished my master's over at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. That was a 2-year program. I lost money on that one right there. And prior to that, I was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. And yes, I will admit, I was given a raise, a small little increase that goes along with whatever Uncle Sam decides or deems it worthy to give. And I did have paid leave to go back home, which I'm sorry if that offends you, but I really did want to see my family.
Phil?
So for the calendar year, I started the calendar year as Mayor Zani's executive assistant. He temporarily promoted me to his chief of staff when our office became short-staffed. I think that amounted to about $400 a week. I'm actually taking the cue from the representative because I actually was reduced that in about February. My pay was cut back down. I returned to the position of executive assistant when the mayor ended up recruiting an attorney to serve as our new chief of staff. I honestly, off the top of my head, don't recall all the sick time. We do get sick time as city employees, or we did get sick time. I'm no longer a city employee here in Methuen. And we also got vacation time, which accrued. I worked for the city for 2.5 years. It accrued every fiscal year, which started in July. I honestly don't know the numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately, Jennifer. I know that I didn't take much sick time. I definitely took, I think, more vacation time, which really there wasn't much vacation with it. So in the past year, I got married, so I did end up taking some vacation time last June for 4 days. My wife wasn't thrilled about that at all, actually. That was only 4 days. But otherwise, yeah, I'm sorry if that's not more detailed or not as detailed as you hoped for.
Okay.
So if other constituents are interested, they can contact City Hall to find out the actual dollar amount?
Oh, I believe that anybody can, especially because I'm a city employee, so that's all public record. Okay. And actually, to be fair, it was actually also in the newspaper, in fact. The newspaper ended up documenting how in the office of the mayor, we went from a 3-staffed office to a 2. And in fact, I believe at one point earlier this decade, it was a 4-staffed office. There were 4 people in that office. I'm actually proud of the fact that the mayor trusted me and let me run that office for 4 months. It actually ended up saving taxpayers approximately $10,000 instead of rushing out to find a new chief of staff. It allowed him to conduct a comprehensive review of who he wanted to see join his team, and I think that she's been a phenomenal addition, actually. So I'm glad he took that time. Again, my wife wasn't thrilled about the extra
well,
time
I just
I
want
was
to give
putting in.
the candidates a chance to jump in. It's equal time on this one if the other candidates have it. Otherwise, we'll move on. I'm sorry. We want to move on to the next.
Well, if that's the case, Jennifer, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we just adding in anything right now, or?
Well, I'm adding up the numbers still, but I'll need some more time. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one. Jennifer, thank you very much. I hope you got the information you were looking for. We're going to move on to the next audience question. Oscar, you will be first on this one. And if our next participant, sir, if you could please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hello, my name is Joe Lambert. I live in Methuen, Mass. And too close? Closer? Thank you for participating in this debate this evening, all of you. My first questions that I wrote down when I came into the meeting were already answered pretty much by on the gas tax, and I appreciate your comments and how you would be supporting the elimination of the add-on tax that never goes away, so to speak. But one question to follow up on that is, when the vote is on the ballot is repealed by the public, would you support the choice of the public to eliminate that tax increase and the long-term undoing of the inflation tax?
I believe, Joe, I just want to make sure I get the question straight before I answer
so
it.
I didn't quite hear all the answers.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'll just reiterate what I've said before. I mean, and I'm sorry I wasn't speaking loud enough, so I'll make sure to do that. But Joe, very good question, first of all. And second of all, as I mentioned before, I'm against the whole idea of the automated, increase of the gas tax. And the reason why is because, as I mentioned before as well, if you're a legislator or you're a representative, you should take a stance, whether to increase it or not, whether to increase the tax or not, and face the consequences. Allowing, say, economic forces, inflation to resolve that issue for you is cowardly, and I don't believe in that.
I agree with that 100%.
I'm glad I see eye to eye.
I'm on the same page as you. I want to see that I'm supportive of the voters having the opportunity to vote on this. I would vote to disconnect it from being indexed to inflation. I think that at the next ballot opportunity, I think that voters should always have that opportunity to add those questions to the ballot. And that's one of the great things about Massachusetts. We're one of the few states that give voters that opportunity.
I would absolutely, Joe. Thank you for asking that question. Absolutely support the voters' decision on that.
Okay, and I think my second question had to do with travel expenses, but you've already covered most of that. So I just hope that all of you will support the ALS Bucket Challenge.
Oh,
Thank you.
way
Already
ahead.
have.
Already did.
Thank you.
That evidence is probably online, right?
Yes,
It's online.
Unfortunately.
Excellent. Well, we do have time for one more audience question. We'll give them some time to come on up. And then we will move on. We'll see where we are. Running on time. We'll see if we can squeeze in one more question and then our closing statement. So you, sir, we'll close this out for the evening.
My name is Jim Began. I'm from Methuen, and I have a question about disability issues. Over 20 years ago, Teddy Kennedy wrote an editorial in the Boston Globe about how in the upcoming fiscal areas, the elderly and the disabled would be competing for money, and the disabled would always lose. The reason being that we are fragmented. We go in and fight every year for budgets for the vision of the blind, for the developmentally disabled, for the hard of hearing. There's a lot of people that fall between those cracks that aren't represented by any of those agencies. I'm wondering if you have any plans, any of you, that would help the disabled in general.
And Phil, you will be first to respond.
Jim, thank you for that question. So Jim, we had a great opportunity to work together when I worked in Mayor Zani's office because you're on our commission on disability, so it's great to see you continuing to advocate. It's funny, my first day door knocking earlier this year, I was pulled over by a woman who brought up her big concern, which was that right now in Massachusetts, it's up to each local municipality on whether or not they maintain data about somebody who is in their home who perhaps suffers from either autism, disability, Down syndrome, and that her big concern was wanting to make sure that police departments were maintaining that information if a resident opted to provide that info, so that in the event 911 ever had to be contacted, Jim, and Methuen currently does this actually, and it's very progressive of them, and it's great that they do it. In the event that 911 was ever dialed, that the police department would know when they arrived at that home that there's potentially somebody in that house that may not respond well to the sirens or may need extra care because they may be autistic or may have Down syndrome. I know that you expressed concern about making sure that there's funding there for people with disabilities. I think that that's incumbent upon any representative, the entire legislative body, to make sure that that funding is prioritized at the State House.
Sorry. Timing's up. Diana, you'll be next to respond.
Thank you for asking that question. In the past session, I had the opportunity to work in the budget process and to work with issues such as funding, and I feel it is very, very important that we take care of our community's most vulnerable citizens, the people that can't help themselves and are disabled or have other issues where they're not being lazy, they can't help themselves. What we had an opportunity to do in the last budget and the budget before that, like I said before, I serve on the Education Committee, and we were able to increase special education funding for children in our public school systems. The state was only funding it at 41%, and the burden for covering those costs was being placed on the local municipalities. The state mandates, as they should, that all children are provided with an equal opportunity for education. We increased that funding up to full funding to make sure that all children have that opportunity. Also, I filed a budget amendment to bring back a little under $150,000 to put disabled veterans back to work in the Merrimack Valley. And some more, but I'm being motioned to stop. Sorry.
Oscar, please.
Jim, thank you very much for attending. And for me, this issue is somewhat personal because my brother, he's mentally challenged. And one thing that he went through was, special ed was such a huge help. And it was a help for, not just for our family, but really for my brother as well. You know, I understand it's so difficult for educators to understand sometimes how to deal with certain individuals who have special needs. And my brother was, no exception to that right there. But the fact is that, special education requires a lot of funding as well, a lot of understanding as well. And for me in particular, when I see the smile on my brother's face, I know quite frankly that, all the money has been worthwhile. And I wouldn't want to deny anyone that as well. And so you can always find a strong advocate with me as well in regards to that issue. I bless you. Thank you very much for everything you're advocating for. It's impressive, and it's worthwhile. Thank you for coming here and asking that question.
Candidates, thank you very much. Joe, thank you very much for that. And we're going to move on now to our last question of the evening. And it's going to be a short one, just to make sure that we have enough time to complete everything for the evening. I'll ask just a quick 30-second response, and it's of the lighter variety before we wrap up tonight. It's a simple one. And Diana, you'll be first to respond. No pressure. Who is your hero, and why did you choose that person? Or heroine?
My mother is my hero. I was raised by a hardworking single mother. I have a great family here in the Merrimack Valley, but my mother worked very hard, put herself through school, worked full-time, and raised me and dedicated her entire life to my existence. So we have 30 seconds to answer this. My mother is my hero. I love her very much, and I wish she could be here tonight, but she's my hero.
Okay. Oscar, the man or woman that has been your hero?
Well, man and woman, I would say the dynamic duo, that of my mother and my father. Can't really separate them, even though they are separated. They love me, but, they can. But I'll tell you this much, being a son of an immigrant family, it's hard. You're put up in a bit of a pedestal, especially when you're the oldest and the son. So the stakes are high. But at the same time, though, their sacrifices, everything they put forward, and everything they hoped is pinned on the idea that not that I make it, to become something or other, but somehow that I just make them proud, that I make myself proud. And being here today, talking to you all, I do feel that way.
And Phil?
You know what, it seems like we all agree on this one. My mother's my hero. When I was 12 years old, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given 4 months to live. And I know that she fought to beat that cancer, to beat and overcome those odds so that she could give her children a good life. And she fights every single day to make sure she's able to give not just her children a good life, even though we're grown, and some of us still throw curveballs at her, but to make sure that my daughter and my wife and everybody in my family is always well taken care of and is always put first. And as a result, she always puts herself last. So she's my hero.
That's a good place to wrap up, I think. Thank you, Mom and Dad. That's a good